Welcome back, folks. Today we're talking about Nuke gas scooter parts. We're going to cover a lot of territory today, talking about a lot of different parts and issues on this scooter. So I guess first things first, we're going to talk about carburation, and we are going to get to show you the full installation of a boost block manifold, which is similar to a boost bottle or is a juice box by ADA. And so I guess we'll just get started, and we'll talk about it as we go along. So we're going to go ahead and finish loosening some of the screws that we had prepped for this video. We'll get to all that in a minute. Your factory air filter, these are real easy to get off by inserting a butter knife. You can break them by trying to pry it with a screwdriver. So we found if you insert a butter knife, it's really easy to get that off. Inside your air box are 2 foams and a metal screen. With those removed, then you can remove the rest of your air box. We do have all kinds of parts available for the Nuke gas scooter: tires, belts, gas caps, fuel lines, carburetors, intake manifolds, handlebar parts, throttle cables, brake cables. Just about anything you'd need we should have, or we will get or make for you if we can. This factory carburetor, the top speed on these bikes is 25 miles an hour. So let me step back and punt here. To show you all that your ignition system and your carburetor are the main 2 governors on this bike. When you get a new Nuke gas scooter, if you can locate this bike, if you have, or this governor, if you have a Cobra, it may be up under the frame, and all you may see is the rubber band across the top of that. But anyways, let's say that with the governor held like this, turning the governor screw counterclockwise, it stops at 7 o'clock and it won't hardly run there. So they're set up, and one of these 4 tips has a pointer on it. Right now it's pointed at 10:30. That's about 19 miles an hour. With a simple turn of a screw, turning that governor all the way till it stops at 4 o'clock, now you're at 25 miles an hour. But we're going to be removing this and showing you a procedure that has more to do with the ignition system. But with this factory carburetor and that governor turned all the way up, you've increased your speed from 19, 20 to 24, 25, 26. So we're going to show you how you can get 30 miles an hour out of these scooters by just replacing the carburetor. Although, warning, these engines are designed with a tang on the flywheel that could come loose and grenade not only the flywheel but damage coils, engine covers, can even break the crankcase. So in this procedure we're about to show you, you can turn the governor all the way up or you can remove it. It's about the same thing. If you just tape that up and zipped it to the wiring, you could completely remove your governor and it's the same thing, no problem. But this factory carburetor here, I'll show you something else about it. Some people want to know what the setting is on this. Well, it should be exactly 2 half turns out. So there's 1 half, 1. Well, it was a little bit, not quite a full turnout. So 1 half, 1 should be your factory setting, up to a turn and a half if it runs better like that. This is a support bracket found on some models but not others. And assume that it'll probably be of some sort of conflict, or we just don't use them, so we're going to go ahead and remove that. Oops, wrong tool. Oh, you know, maybe that is the right tool. These screws that you take out of that support bracket can double as replacement screws for your engine cover, so you may want to hold on to those screws and possibly the bracket just in case you ever decide you need it later, but it doesn't really work with a high performance carburetor. I guess now would be a good time to talk about the intake manifold. Here's your factory intake manifold, and what you want to do is when you get your carburetor kit, the gasket that goes between your insulator or intake manifold and your carburetor will be mounted on the scooter still. So what you do is you take We took a little pen knife and opened up one of those holes just a little bit so it wasn't, you know, too small. And then take a couple bolts. Actually what works real good is the bolts for your air box. I just had these other stainless ones handy, so with them screwed back in, then take a permanent marker and you can look at how much bigger the opening of your new carburetor is going to be than your old one. You can just bolt a high performance carburetor on here and it actually works pretty good, but if you want to go the extra mile, you can look at dremeling out the intake manifold everywhere where we've painted silver, and then to make sure that you don't have to rotate the gasket to get it to line up and try to tighten it down while you're rotating it. Get the gasket to hang there and also mark the intake manifold and see maybe even if there's a little bit of modification that needs to be done there. So with the gasket back off, you can see there how we need a slight modification there at the carb signal hole, and we could trim quite a bit of material away from the air passage there. So with our intake manifold, we already went ahead and prepped one. We've already removed the extra little bit of material there, and we've opened it up quite a bit just to show you how much we've opened it up. We couldn't really open it anymore because this walls are starting to get kind of thin there, but you can see the mods we've made. There's little to no material left there restricting the air and fuel. So you can see how much more a modified manifold is opened up. So that's the manifold we're going to be putting back on here in a minute. So we're going to go ahead and take our manifold off because we got a surprise for you today. I guess we already mentioned it. Boost block manifolds. So to get an idea of what a boost block manifold is, it has the air passage for the air and fuel through it, and also does have the carb signal hole and your bolt holes. But if you can see, I don't know at this angle if you can see it, there's where air and fuel atoms would actually be up in this chamber, storing up in there and then releasing under throttle to give you a stronger mid-range response. It's less intake noise. It could result in 1 to 2 miles an hour more top speed. So that's what a boost block manifold does for you. It's kind of like a non-motorized turbo chamber, if you will. And we like that better than drilling a hole in the manifold, putting a fitting in it, running a hose and having a little bottle to the side. Not everybody wants to drill a hole in their manifold. And we also always like the billet accessories, the aluminum accessories. I guess shouldn't be reusing any of that on this bike. So. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually go away from all that for a minute to show you the boost block manifold before we get back to the carburetor here. So with your engine cover off, we're going to talk about the boost block manifold and replacing these coils. The problem with the boost block manifold is even though our kits come with a thick Teflon gasket that doubles as a phenolic spacer, we still have some clearance issues. So there's your Teflon gasket, and when you put it up there, it's hitting this cylinder head. You can see how it won't really sit flush. It's rocking there. So cylinder head will have to be modified in order to install the boost block manifold, which could be done with a file, could be done with a hacksaw. We're going to do it with a grinder here on video for you. While we're grinding this, we don't want magnetic portions of the flywheel to pick up aluminum or whatever. It's really probably not an issue. You could probably just tape all this off. But since we're going to show you getting rid of the problematic ignition system that is this yellow metal tang on the flywheel here. This yellow metal tang here comes loose from the flywheel, breaks the fins, takes out coils, and can really damage your engine. So, and these are kind of problematic ignition systems. So we'll also be showing you installation of the Scootr heavy duty and fantastic Type 1 ignition coil, and we'll also be talking to you about the economic Type 2 coil and the pros and cons and differences of those. So I know we're jumping around a lot here, but it's all kind of overlapping labor, so rather than make 3 completely separate videos, we just figured we'd do it all in one. With the screws out of your cover, you want to make sure you don't drop your cover on the ground or whatever, but normally your carburetor would be in the way. You can just find this flat spot right here and find something to just tap the cover loose. Same thing on both sides. And that way, and then we didn't drop it to the floor. And let me see, did I get an extra trigger module over here? I guess not. So we're going to set this up to a side for a minute, and we'll come back to coils here in a minute. We're going to go ahead and also throw something else in on this video, which is timing advance. So, and clutch shoe removal and reinstallation. So let's go ahead and pretend like our clutch shoe has come apart, or our spring's broken. Signs of a broken clutch or a messed up clutch might be when you pull it over, it lurches forward like the clutch is always engaged. That could be from both shoes being on one side or a broken spring. I hope I brought my 12 socket. On these clutch shoes, folks, the arrows will be on the back side, and on these bolts there's a wave washer under the head and a flat washer on back. So with that cover on that we just took off, you don't really want to try to change out clutch shoes with this cover on, because chances are that washer is going to fall down in there and you're going to end up having to take the cover off anyways. So we recommend just going ahead, and if you're going to do work to the clutch, just go ahead and take the top cover and this side cover off so that you don't have to worry about losing the washers down in the flywheel cavity there. 12mm socket. Oh good, we did bring it. Also have had people ask how to take this flywheel off, so this is the perfect chance to see how to take the flywheel off. With the nut removed from the center, start it back on a couple of threads to catch your flywheel so it doesn't end up on the floor with a broken fin. And then take yourself a flat screwdriver and a small hammer, and on this back side here, I guess you could see it, well, right in there, I'll be coming through this biggest cavity, I guess. Yeah, go ahead and show this back here. Back up a little bit. This largest cavity, I'll be coming in through that hole, and then trying to find a portion of the flywheel which would be like the magnet portion or this other block portion, something sturdy to smack on. So coming into that top hole once more. Okay. Don't keep hitting in the same spot. If it doesn't seem like it wants to come loose, go ahead and rotate it around to another area and try striking it again. And now it's free. Once your flywheel's free, then go ahead and take your nut off and set your flywheel to the side. And timing advance creates a premature spark, can also result in about a mile-an-hour top end. So if the engine, while turning, turns forward like that, then this is a Z-shaped key. Because we're going to move the alignment of the flywheel forward so that it sparks sooner. So what we're going to do is take a pair of Dykstra pliers and remove the existing flywheel keyway and set it to the side just in case for some reason you need that someday. And take your Z key, timing advance key. Make sure you don't put it in with it jogged to the right, because that's going to retard the timing. So you want to put it in with it jogged forward for the direction of rotation of the motor that you're advancing, not retarding the timing. So we'll take our timing advance key, get it nestled down in there, and then we can reinstall our flywheel. It'd be a good time to either put a little Loctite on that shaft, or you can put it in the nut, either one. So we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of, put a little Loctite on there. And then locate your position in the back. Since we're not just advancing the timing, we are doing a racing coil on here. This tang does need to be removed as part of that procedure, so let's go ahead and do it now. What do we do with those dikes? Dikes, pliers, anything. Just bite that yellow piece, turn it up. When it starts cracking, you're free. Now that can never fly off. Break all these fins, break your crankcase, break your plastic cover, take out your coils, creating an $80 to $250 bill. So now you've got a flywheel that's good and cannot explode. So watching it from the top to make sure that you haven't shifted your advance key out of its proper position, load it on, and then start your nut. And there's your timing advanced. Now we'll go ahead and reinstall those clutch shoes. We'll also put a little bit of Loctite on them. I guess I should have left the Loctite open. Arrows on the back. If you order a new clutch assembly for your Nuke gas scooter or other scooters powered by this Eton 41.5cc 2.2 horsepower engine, save your old clutch spring if it's not broke, because sometimes your spring could break but your shoes could still be good. So I guess what we're saying is you could pair a good spring with a pair of clutch shoes that needs a spring and have clutch shoes all over again. Because the spring is not available separately, neither are they per shoe. They're both shoes and the spring as an assembly. Now our timing's advanced, and we didn't want to jump around too much, so we covered that. But aluminum is not magnetic, so we don't really have to worry about aluminum filings grinding on this fin, getting on the magneto there. But it is good to have this cavity off just to make sure. Okay, we're talking about type 1 and type 2 coils, and timing advance, and high performance carburetors, and boost block manifolds. I know this is very confusing, but this is a type, let me see, this is a type 1 coil, and you can see how similar it is to your factory coil. The shape, the locations of the prong, everything is just real similar to the factory coil. The down leg is just a little shorter, but there's no issues in conflict with installing a type 1 coil. Bolts up no problem. You don't have to modify the cover. If you're installing the type 2 here, this one here has the cover modified, and what we're talking about by modifying the cover is you have to grind out this whole section right there so that the coil will mount flush there, which makes it hard to get to this prong. So we recommend, if you're going to do the type 2 coil and do the cover modification procedure, we recommend that you go ahead and install your wires before installing your coil onto your cover so that they have easy access. The other option you'd have on doing the type 2 coil would be to put nuts behind it, which we have this one here set up so you can see that. Another problem with the type 2 coil is the wire comes up short, so you either end up having to notch your plastic cover, cut the corner out of the rubber, or whatever, because the wire comes up short. It's not long enough to come from the original hole like the type 1 is. There's only $16 difference between the two coils, but there's a lot of thickness difference. You can see the armature, how thick it is on type 1. It's like the factory coil, and the type 2, wherever it went, is rather thin. They're really not, the same type of coil. Is type 2 a good coil? Yes. Is it frustrating to install? Yes. I've had people order one and then say, "Oh, I don't want to modify my cover. I don't like this," and end up ordering a type 1 anyway. So So up front, there's the disclosure that the wire is short, they're tricky to mount. We'll talk about covers in a minute. This pattern fits really good on there. Here's one with a boost block manifold already installed over here. We've already got the boost block manifold installed to it on an engine, so you can see how that looks there. And so, okay, this is what we wanted to show you here. If I take this cover off and stick it on an engine that hasn't been modified, this kill switch connector prong is like little or no distance away from the fins. So we're saying that if you're going to do a Type 2 coil and put nuts behind it rather than modifying the cover, we recommend that you trim these two fins just to keep the heat of the fins and keep the engine away from that wiring. Well, if you're going to do a Type 2 coil and a boost block manifold, then you grind the whole fin. So we're going to show you grinding this side that affects the Type 2 coil only, and this back side that affects the boost block manifold, even though we're going to be doing a Type 2 coil on this engine today. So let's get started on this boost block manifold. Thought I had a cylinder head here marked how it was supposed to be cut, but anyways, okay. Of these two fins, this upper one, you barely need to trim it at all on the top, on the right. But then as you progress towards the left, it's more. And that would be all the more trim, and then also including the second fin, you can take most of it out all the way across until where it's in to the level of the one below it. So, but if you're also doing the Type 2 coil, then you can go ahead and take some of this off too on both of those fins to make sure that it doesn't interfere with your wiring. So to keep debris from getting everywhere on this grinding, since we're going to show you to grind it with a grinder, which it's just the quickest, easiest way to do it. You can do this with a Dremel, you can do it with a file like we said, or you can do it with a hacksaw. But now that all of our nice parts are all covered up, take a grinder to a brand new engine. And the hopefully not tragic mistake that I just made was I meant to show everybody that I would tape this off while you're doing that to make sure you don't get any debris down in the motor. I'm going to grab a piece of sandpaper and I'll be right back. So if you did it with a grinder just the way I did, you may have kind of some little burrs and stuff. So let's take a sheet of sandpaper, take off any burrs here. This is what I was talking about since I forgot to show it in the video. While you're doing a boost block manifold, you may want to go ahead and have all this off over here, but it would probably be good to have your intake taped off to keep metal shavings out of your engine. And sandpaper grit. So sorry I forgot to put the tape on. Yeah, that's probably pretty important to put that tape on before you go grinding on the heat fins of your engine. There's still plenty of heat fins. That doesn't affect the engine at all. It just allows the installation of these other accessories. That went better than we thought, huh? Okay, now that you've got that off, you can proceed to installing your boost block manifold, which is the boost block manifold itself. I'll pull this chair out here just so I have a place to lay it out. Unplug the power tool. Your kit will come with 4 bolts, of which we don't expect you'll be using these short ones unless you have a billet intake manifold, which we have not added to the website or released yet or made videos on. But the billet intake manifold is a lot shorter than your factory manifold, so we went ahead and included those bolts so that it'll fit both applications, whether you want to reuse your factory intake manifold or go with a racing billet one. So with the longer bolts, put your provided lock washer and washer on the bolts. And put them through your intake manifold. The carb signal holes on the bottom, the arrow printed on the insulator intake manifold points up. And then, okay, on the back side of your factory intake manifold is the gray gasket included in the kit. You don't reuse your factory gasket. And then the boost block manifold, and then the Teflon gasket insulator for your boost block manifold. Then we should be able to get this on now without it contacting the cylinder head at all. And we've got clearance. I don't know if you could get the camera down here and actually show it, but we actually trimmed off more of the heat fins than was necessary to create clearance, but you know, a moderate trim will get it done. Now this boost block manifold has a slight lean to the right, so in a minute we'll show you trimming your cover and how to get one to fit right. We cut 2 or 3 or 4 covers by the time we figured out how to cut one, so we're going to save you all that anguish and trouble and just show you how to cut it right the first time. Alternate back and forth between these bolts. Make sure you're not over tightening one so that they're evenly tight. And so that we can put on our engine cover in a minute, we'll go ahead and install our Type 2 coil. So like I said, we're shifting gears here a lot. Once you get your Type 1 coil to replace your factory ignition system, install your bolts and leave it loose like that. Then don't worry about this prong, but push this part up as high as you can. While pushing up on your coil, snug the bolts lightly to hold it out of the way. Then go ahead and reinstall your cover, making sure that your dowel pins are both back in the cover so that the cover has proper location. Once you have those aligned, it snaps on pretty easy. Go ahead and install all 4 of your bolts to make sure that your cover is in the exact position it's always going to be. And while we're right here, we discussed now that we've changed the ignition system, we no longer need this governor. And this plate right here, not sure exactly what it's for. Keeping heat in, I think it would probably cool better without it there. I'm not sure what that plate's for, but we take them off. And so with that back on, then we'll go ahead and reinstall our transmission. do through there. Okay, I guess we can look over here at this bike for 1 second. To show you this right side, it's really tricky or pointless to try to do a special cut over here. But on this side, we tried to keep the cut real simple and just go straight down, which leaves this cavity open and unprotected to a rock flying up and getting down there with the flywheel. So we've decided this is really not a good way to cut the cover. So we'll show you what we think is a good way to cut the cover, which is like this. Now, this one we took off is cut really well and it fits really good around the boost block manifold. So to get this type of a fit that this one has, we'll show you how to cut it, and you can see how nice it fits. It's actually kind of tricky to get on. I wasn't kidding, was it? But it keeps all that area that we were just talking about blocked off, you know, other than the small little area there. But anyways, if you just cut it kind of sloppy, you can see how if you don't cut it just right, how you can have that protection we were just talking about, but you still got a, you know, bigger hole and bigger gap on the side. But you can see how close that is on this side and how close it comes up to the bottom. So to get a really nice cut, grab a pen and write this down if you're going to do about to do your installation. This is the back. So you just follow up this side to the bottom of this third hole. Then to determine how high you need to go on the left, which is the natural lean here on the boost block manifold, it's got a lean to it. So come up 2 5/8 inches, and that's your top line. That's how you can find your angle. Then you'll come in, you can always trim more, but you can't put plastic back, so you could come in 1/8 of an inch or whatever that is there, and the stopping point on there is 1 3/8 inches. So if you come in 1 3/8 and kind of curve up a little bit from that one, or no, that is 1 3/8, curve down a little bit from 1 3/8 there, and 2 5/8 there are your measurements. All the X'd areas come out, and then you end up with a nice looking cover like that. So we'll go ahead, and since this is a low rider and it's that low to the ground, we probably are that much more likely for a piece of debris to come up, so we'll use this perfectly cut cover on this one. Other than we're one step ahead of ourselves here. We still need wiring to go for the kill switch. So we removed this holder coil. So we're going to show you one more time, we have other videos showing this, we're going to show you one more time the proper way to gut one of these holder coils. So we found that a butter knife or a flat tip screwdriver helps to release the prongs real easy there from the coil. And then we've also found that a common kitchen spoon is one of the best tools to remove this trigger module. You can break these tabs off, like for say you weren't putting a racing coil on there, you were just swapping parts to test. Well, you could break it by prying on it unevenly. So we found that if you take a spoon and kind of rotate it towards the right like that, then you can get your trigger module free without breaking it. So since we already had another cover prepped, we don't need this factory one there. And so taking your trigger module and a pair of dikes, pull down the sheathing. You do want the 2 prongs that go to your coil there. We're running out of time? Or no, okay. You do want those, but you do not want a trigger module at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in and cut away the trigger module and do the same thing over here, cut it away again. So then, to make sure we don't have shorting out of wires, it would be good to take your tape and tape those off. Make sure they don't short out against each other, creating you an extra kill switch that presses itself. So we broke our wire there from that little metal or brass brad or whatever the hell the wires together. So that shouldn't happen, but maybe that's what goes wrong with some of these trigger modules, is some type of short or disconnection inside. So to make sure that the wires held together really good, we stripped both wires and then twisted them against each other so they're intertwined there. Best way to do soldering is from the bottom. If you can get the wire hot enough, you can start a little solder on top and then heat it from the bottom, and when you feel that that's hot enough that you could actually solder, keep the soldering iron on the bottom but yet solder from the top, you've probably got enough heat to it. So there, that wire is joined together and soldered now. Which in all the other videos and all the other coils we've put on, we've actually haven't had one of those break. So that kind of caught us a little off guard to see that wiring come apart. It's not because of the way we cut it, it's because it was the way it was made from the manufacturer. What you're trying to do, folks, is completely get rid of all the ignition system regulatory control that makes just for more problems to go wrong with your ignition system. Then come to this end, and what we're eliminating is the complete black and white circuit. All we're going to have left is the black and red. If you have a ATV with this system, red is red, blue is black, and this black with white is gray. But anyways, back to what we were saying, we're eliminating the gray with white circuit. So if you have one of these special tools, you can insert it into the end of the connector there and extract your black and white circuit, and then oops, I've done pulled it down in there. It still seems to be connected up here on the top, which seems somewhat unusual too. Guess we're fixing to find out how. Okay, there's the black and white leg right there. So some of these trigger modules are put together a little differently. So I guess we missed that. We had a black and white leg off the top for the trigger module, and we also have this black and white leg here. So we'll need one more little piece of tape. But now we should be able to pull our black and white circuit out. And now we have the black and white circuit gone. We can actually tape these two wires together because there shouldn't be any conflicting connections there. And now we've reduced it all to two wires, except for we've still got one more little leg. Now we've got what we were after, which is just two wires to connect your kill switch to the coil itself. Now these are red and black, and on your factory coil it is notated which one goes to which. Like it says red there and black there. Well, it really doesn't matter, because this coil will not run without wiring and that holder coil we just had and that tang on the flywheel. But this coil will run without any wires connected to it. So your kill switch, let's say it's running right now, take a screwdriver or a metal object and lay it across those two prongs and it shuts the engine off. So that's all we're going to be doing with this, is shutting the engine off. So it doesn't matter this way, that way, 6 of one, half a dozen the other. It does not matter which way you connect these connectors, which, as you can see on the Type 1 coil, they're nice and easy to get to, just like on the factory coil. So now we need to shim our coil, because your factory green coil has some black dowel pins that you can't see unless I take this off, but they're roll pins that locate the coil. You don't have to shim a factory coil. Well, you don't use those pins on the racing coil. What you do is take a business card or a shim card that's included with your coil, and you insert it. First you turn your flywheel to where the magnetic portion is directly underneath the coil. You can see the magnet starting to come right there underneath there. So I think the easiest way to do it is get it in from this side, but I did one earlier today. Oh, that was gravy. I had a lot of trouble getting one in earlier today. So with the card between the magnetic portion of the flywheel and the coil, loosen the bolts that you previously tensioned to hold the coil out of the way. And what you want is it drop down as much in the front. It's going to suck down in the middle or the back all on its own, but it could, I guess it's going to pretty much just rest. You don't really have to push it down or anything, but to make sure it doesn't shift while you're tightening your first bolt, you may want to just hold it down while you tighten your first ignition coil bolt. You might want to alternate a little on these too. Previously we told you to Loctite these bolts. We realize now that that's probably not necessary. Just good and tight is good enough. Go easy, we're not responsible for bolts being broke off in your cover. Okay, now that your coil is shimmed and wired and your timing has been advanced and your boost block manifold's been installed, you're ready to put back on your cover. So you fish your kill switch wiring through the top and your ignition wire, and install your screws back in. We're also going to go ahead and upgrade the spark plug. The factory spark plug is a NGK BPM 7A. That's Bob, Paul, Mary 7A, which is a good plug and it should be fine. But if ever replacing the spark plug or going with a high performance coil or a high performance carburetor, you might want to go with a BPM 6A. 6 is hotter than 7, 7 is hotter than 8. We don't really recommend the Y plugs. The Y plugs would have an electrode with a V cut in it. Don't recommend those really. Had a bad experience with one, and one bad experience was all it took for us. But you want to gap your spark plug on the Type 2 coil that we've talked about. A friend of mine says that they run best gapped at 25 thousandths. We've always gapped all of ours at 30 thousandths, and we're using a Type 1 coil, so we're going to stick with our rule of 30 thousandths. If you are running the Type 2 coil, you may want to consider trying that 25 thousandths gap for whatever reason that is. There is a crush ring on a spark plug, so it's going to feel different the first time you tighten it than any time you take it out and put it back in. So the first time you're crushing a ring. After that it's already crushed, so you may not get the same type of effect feeling. Sometimes a little saliva in these is needed to get it to go on. Okay, there we go. Now it's on. And you can reconnect your kill switch wiring. There, we'll probably wrap it around our throttle cable when we're all done. And we're also going to show you that up inside the frame here, these wires are loose and can be in the way of your drive shaft. So we're also going to show you zip tying those forward to your fuel lines so that they're out of the way and can't rub your drive shaft. But now one of the first things we started this video for, we're finally going to get to, which is the intake or the high performance carburetor. A Walbro 700 by Walbro. We do have rebuild kits for it, so they're really cheap to service. It's about $15, $16 to get a primer bulb and all the gaskets that you need to rebuild one of these carburetors if it gets full of gunk. So with your Walbro 700 high performance kit will come a velocity stack and gasket, and your carburetor already all set up with a swivel, high performance throttle cable mounting bracket and barrel. It already comes pre-tuned and with your choke lever on it. Now these choke levers do need to be glued on or else they'll just fall off. So with your velocity stack and gasket and your factory air filter bolts going through your velocity stack, Then use your gasket. Make sure that gasket's okay. Whoop. And install it to your intake manifold there. And we've actually found that it's easier to connect the throttle cable with the carburetor off, so we'll go ahead and try to do that. While the carburetor's off, makes it a little bit easier to connect than sometimes on the side. So since we were that close to off. Now there are adjustments on your throttle cable, and these may need to be maxed out, giving the most slack. So if you turn the barrel this way and jam the nut down on it, you're shortening the inner cable. Well, you want as much length as possible out of the inner cable, which it looks like we're going to have enough here. Already having maxed those out, we have found that you can cut this nut out with a Dremel, unscrew it all the way, and then cut through that nut on both sides, and it'll pop and fall out. Or you can remove the nut up here on the throttle, to unload your throttle cable from your twist throttle. Take this nut off and swivel that elbow up in there until you have enough slack. Either way, that's the easiest way up there at the throttle, but we also have been known to cut that nut out of the throttle cable. With the throttle cable fed through the spring, you may have to trim your spring if you just can't get it connected. Spring seems too long. You could try cutting it, but for every bit that you cut out of the throttle cable, that'll be that much less push or return power that it has. And there we've got our throttle cable connected, which was a lot easier pressed against my big fat belly than it would be with it over here on the side. So since we didn't have to adjust the cable, we'll go ahead and put our boot back. And primer bulb on top. Route your throttle cable up over the left side of the motor, because if you route it over the top, it'll probably burn on the exhaust. These nuke gas scooters and all these scooters that come with this muffler here, they're really prone to rusting. The paint on it that comes on it's really thin, so we recommend taking your muffler off, sanding it or sandblasting it, heat coating it with 12 to 1500 degree paint, getting a new exhaust gasket, and reinstalling your muffler with the new gasket to keep it from rusting. So if you get a new one of these scooters and don't paint it, you'll probably regret it, because within the first year or so the muffler will be all rusted up. Also alternating the bolts on these, I guess let me just check one more time to make sure that I had that boost block manifold tight the way I wanted it. One more time, just to make sure I feel good about that. If you're putting a high performance carburetor on while you have your carburetor off, check those bolts just to make sure that they're tight. It's really not usually a problem on these models, but a loose intake manifold could create air leaks and running problems. There's your high performance carburetor installed. Both of these high and low screws come set at 1.5 turns out. They are labeled L and H. They have little letters by them. If it's idling too low, take the L screw and turn it in. If it's idling too high, take the L screw and turn it out a little bit until you can adjust your idle. Then here's what we were talking about not using zip ties for your ignition wire here. Just simply keep it out of the way by spiraling it around your throttle cable, and then any extra slack that you have after doing that will be made up underneath down inside, getting rid of that slack. So you could probably push that down out of the way so it looks nice and neat. Then with your Walbro 700 high performance carb kit, you can get a carbon fiber filter, you can get a shell covered filter, which you can see down in this filter, the actual filter. But you can get these in red, purple, black, blue, chrome. I think that's all the colors, red, chrome, black, blue, and purple. Or you can upgrade to a K&N air filter. This is a $13 upgrade, but this is a $42 filter, and we only and this is a $17 filter. So you'd say, well, gee, you know, that's $25 more. Well, no, it's only $13 more. We're proud to present actual K&N brand air filters now at Scootr.com, which will do a separate commercial on them at only like $29 or $29.95. Local parts store wants $42 for that filter. So we'll go ahead and install our clamp to our air filter. We do have separate videos showing all these different filters, so if you're curious what the blue looks like, or the carbon fiber, or the K&N installation looks like, we do have other videos for that. Recommend that you take this screw out and put out on some type of Loctite. You can see I barely touched it. Most people will get these and go riding. The first time they go riding, they'll have lost their shell, and they need some type of screw to go in there. So let's see, let me find a bolt for that. I should have had one handy. Oh, I thought I did have one. I don't know what I did with it. So we're either using the screw that comes with the filter, or an Allen head, or sometimes we'll use one that's really long, so it would have to walk a long way before it fell out. Put a little bit of probably blue Loctite. I don't have any blue Loctite. Red Loctite, you may not be able to get your filter apart to clean it. But so with a little bit of Loctite, preferably blue, to keep this cover from being lost, reinstall your cover and put your screw back in, if I can even get it started here. And you may tighten it till you hear a little bit of scrunching or feel like you've got some threads or penetration. And that has been timing advance and boost block manifold and high performance carburetor and clutch shoes install and flywheel removal on a Nuke gas scooter.